Witness the extraordinary moment when an undercover boss learns the true meaning of generosity from someone who has nothing. This story will transform how you see wealth, compassion, and human dignity. In the bustling streets of Seattle, where tech giants cast long shadows over century-old storefronts, David Morrison adjusted his worn-out baseball cap in the reflection of a coffee shop window. The early morning fog clung to his shoulders like a damp shawl, obscuring the fact that this seemingly ordinary man in faded jeans and a threadbare jacket was actually the founder and CEO of the Fresh Fare grocery chain, a billion-dollar company. With stores across the Pacific Northwest, David had built Fresh Fare from a single corner store into a retail empire, but lately something felt off. Customer complaints were rising, employee turnover had reached an all-time high, and the company's once famous community spirit seemed to be fading like an old photograph. The board members suggested cost-cutting measures and automated checkout systems, but David suspected the problem, and its solution lay somewhere deeper in the heart of his company. That's why, for the past month, he'd been working incognito as Dave, a trainee at various Fresh Fare locations. Today marked his final week, and he'd chosen store number 37, situated in the city's rapidly gentrifying Belltown district, where gleaming condos loomed over homeless shelters and soup kitchens. He'd deliberately picked the early morning shift, when the store was quietest, perfect for observing the real dynamics of his business without the usual chaos of peak hours. As Dave pushed through the employee entrance at 5:45 a.m., the familiar scent of fresh bread and coffee greeted him. Sarah Chen, the store's baker for 15 years, was already hard at work, her hands covered in flour as she prepared the day's first batch of sourdough. She gave him a warm smile, but didn't pause in her rhythmic kneading. In his month undercover, David had learned more from these quiet morning moments than from 1,000 executive meetings. The store wouldn't open for another hour, but there was already a small group of regulars waiting outside, mostly elderly residents from the nearby senior living facility and a few early bird commuters. Among them, David noticed a man in a weather-beaten coat, his possessions packed neatly in a well-worn backpack. The man stood slightly apart from the others, but his posture carried a dignity that caught David's attention. Lisa Martinez, the morning shift supervisor, was training Dave today. "First rule of opening," she said, fishing out a ring of keys from her pocket. "We treat everyone with respect, no matter what they look like or how much they spend." Her words carried the weight of experience, and David found himself reaching for his notepad. Not the leather-bound one he used in board meetings, but a cheap spiral notebook that fit his current role. As the fluorescent lights flickered to life and the security system chimed its morning greeting, David couldn't have known that in less than an hour, this ordinary Tuesday would become the day that would reshape not just his company, but his entire understanding of what it meant to serve others. The man in the weather-beaten coat would turn out to be much more than just another early morning customer, and the lesson he was about to teach would be worth more than all the business. Degrees hanging on David's office wall. The morning crew moved through their opening routine with practiced efficiency, checking temperatures, stocking shelves, and preparing the store for the day ahead. Dave was assigned to help Sarah arrange the fresh pastries in the display case, a task that offered a perfect view of the entrance. At exactly 7 a.m., Lisa unlocked the front doors, and the small group of waiting customers filed in, bringing with them the cool morning air and the quiet energy of a new day. What happened next would become the stuff of company legend, a story that would be told and retold in break rooms and board meetings alike. But at that moment, as the homeless man stepped through the automatic doors with careful deliberation, no one, not the early morning shoppers selecting their fresh produce, not Lisa counting the float in Register 3, and certainly not David Morrison himself, had any idea they were about to witness an act of kindness that would challenge everything they thought they knew about wealth, dignity, and the true meaning of success. The morning crowd dispersed throughout the store, their footsteps echoing against the freshly mopped floors. Dave watched as the man in the weathered coat made his way to the day-old bread section, where fresh fare offered slightly imperfect items at reduced prices. His movements were deliberate, each item carefully inspected with the precision of someone who understood the value of every penny. Sarah nudged Dave gently. "That's Thomas," she whispered while arranging cranberry scones. "He comes in 3 times a week, always buys something, and never fails to thank us." The warmth in her voice suggested this wasn't just another customer, but part of the store's morning rhythm. Dave noticed how Thomas treated each loaf with respect, checking dates and ingredients with the expertise of a seasoned shopper. As Thomas selected a modest loaf of whole wheat bread and a bruised apple, Dave's attention was drawn to a commotion at the front. A young woman in a business suit was frantically searching her pockets, her face flushed with embarrassment at the register. Lisa, ever patient, stood waiting as the woman's panic grew visible. "I swear I had my wallet," the woman stammered, her designer coffee tumbling from her grip and spilling across the floor. "I must have left it in my other coat." "Uga!" The small line forming behind her shifted uncomfortably, that unique mix of sympathy and impatience that comes with early morning delays. Dave grabbed a mop and headed toward the spill, playing his part as the dutiful trainee. But before he could reach the scene, Thomas stepped forward, his own items still cradled in one arm. Without hesitation, he reached into his worn backpack and pulled out a carefully folded $5 bill. "Please," he said, his voice carrying a gentle authority that silenced the growing murmurs, "let me help." The woman began to protest, but Thomas continued with a smile that reached his eyes. "I've been there before. Sometimes we all need a hand up, not a handout." Dave froze mid-step, the mop forgotten in his hands. Here was a man who likely counted every cent, offering to pay for a stranger's coffee without a second thought. The woman's eyes welled up as she accepted Thomas's kindness with grace, promising to return the money tomorrow. "Pay it forward instead," Thomas suggested, placing his own items on the counter. "That's how we build community." Lisa rang up both transactions, her movements slower than usual, as if preserving the moment. Dave found himself moving closer, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. As Thomas counted out exact change for his bread and apple, Dave noticed his hands, clean but weathered, marked by years of outdoor life. A small notebook fell from Thomas's pocket, its pages filled with neat handwriting. "You dropped this," Dave said, bending to retrieve it. As he handed it back, he caught glimpses of poetry, sketches of the neighborhood, and carefully tracked expenses. This wasn't just a homeless man. This was someone who carried his entire world with organized dignity. Thomas thanked him with a nod that felt like a blessing. "New here?" he asked, tucking the notebook away. When Dave confirmed he was training, Thomas smiled. "Remember, everyone who walks through those doors has a story. Some are just harder to read than others." The interaction might have ended there, but Thomas paused, studying Dave's face with unexpected intensity. "You know," he said, reaching into his bag once more, "you look like you could use this more than me." He pulled out his second item, the bruised apple, and offered it to Dave. "Oh, I couldn't," Dave protested, his throat tight with emotion he hadn't expected. "Take it," Thomas insisted. "I've learned that sharing what little you have multiplies it somehow. Besides," he added, with a wink, "you've got a long day ahead of you, and Sarah's bread is always better with fresh fruit." In that moment, as Dave accepted the apple from a man who had every reason to keep it for himself, something fundamental shifted in his understanding of his own company. He'd spent years focusing on profit margins and expansion plans. But here, was the essence of what fresh fare was supposed to be, a place where dignity and kindness mattered more than dollars and cents. As Thomas headed toward the exit, Lisa turned to Dave. "You know what's really amazing? He does things like this, at least once a week. Never tells anyone his story, never asks for recognition, just helps where he can." She paused, watching Thomas disappear into the brightening morning. Makes you wonder who's really rich in this world, doesn't it? Dave looked down at the apple in his hands, its imperfect surface catching the early morning light. In his other life as David Morrison, he'd eaten at the finest restaurants, closed million-dollar deals, and shaped the destiny of thousands of employees. But standing there, holding a bruised apple given in pure generosity, he felt humbled in a way no business setback had ever managed. Throughout the remainder of his shift, Dave couldn't shake the impact of the morning's events. Every time he glanced at the front entrance, he half expected to see Thomas return, as if the universe hadn't quite finished delivering its lesson. The bruised apple sat carefully wrapped in his locker, becoming more symbol than fruit with each passing hour. During his lunch break, instead of retreating to the break room as usual, Dave found himself drawn to the store's loading dock. From this vantage point, he could observe the back alley where several homeless individuals had created an informal community. Some were organizing cardboard for recycling, others sharing coffee from dented thermoses. Their quiet dignity echoed Thomas's earlier actions. Lisa joined him, carrying 2 cups of Sarah's fresh coffee. "Thinking about Thomas?" she asked, offering him one. Dave nodded, accepting the steaming cup. "You know, before I started working here, I used to avoid eye contact with homeless people," Lisa admitted. "Then I met Thomas. He taught me that sometimes the people with the least to give are the ones who give the most." She went on to share how Thomas had organized an informal network among the homeless community. They would pool their resources to help newcomers, share information about job opportunities, and even maintain a small library of donated books in the shelter. "Last winter," Lisa continued, "when we had that terrible storm, Thomas convinced the shelter to stay open extra hours. Probably saved lives that night." Dave felt something stir within him, not just emotion, but the beginning of an idea. As CEO, he'd implemented numerous community outreach programs, all carefully calculated for maximum PR impact. But watching the small acts of kindness unfold in the alley below, he realized how superficial those initiatives had been. The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, each interaction now colored by his morning experience. Dave noticed things he'd overlooked before, how Sarah quietly set aside slightly damaged produce for certain customers she knew were struggling, how the security guard, Miguel, would discreetly guide elderly shoppers to the seating area when they needed rest, how the deli staff occasionally made mistakes that resulted in extra sandwiches being marked down at closing time. His own employees had created an informal support system while he'd been focused on quarterly reports and shareholder meetings. The real fresh fare wasn't in the corporate mission statement hanging in his office. It was here, in these small acts of humanity that occurred daily without recognition or reward. As his shift neared its end, Dave retreated to the storage room, ostensibly to inventory cleaning supplies. In reality, he needed space to think. Pulling out his trainee notebook, he began to write, his normally precise handwriting becoming messier. As ideas flowed faster than he could capture them, the store's intercom crackled to life. "Cleanup needed in aisle 3. Dave grabbed his mop, but this time the routine task felt different. Each stroke of the mop became a meditation on purpose and possibility. He thought about Thomas's words, "Everyone who walks through those doors has a story." What stories had he missed in his pursuit of expansion and profit? How many Thomases had passed through his stores, carrying wisdom he'd been too busy to notice? The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Dave worked, their steady drone accompanying his deepening revelation. Near closing time, the woman from the morning's coffee incident returned, holding a $5 bill. When Lisa explained that Thomas hadn't been back, the woman stood silent for a moment before asking if there was a store charity program she could donate to instead. Lisa had to tell her no. Fresh Fair's corporate policy prohibited soliciting or accepting donations at store level. Dave watched the interaction from behind the customer service desk, where he was filing end-of-day reports. The woman eventually left, still holding her $5, looking disappointed at being unable to return the kindness she'd received. Another missed opportunity, another connection left unmade. As he helped close the store, Dave realized that his month-long undercover journey had been leading to this moment. He'd started this experiment thinking he would find operational inefficiencies or employee misconduct. Instead, he'd discovered something far more valuable, the beating heart of his company, hidden beneath spreadsheets and profit margins. Thomas's bruised apple had shown him more about business than any Harvard case study ever could. True value wasn't just about monetary transactions. It was about creating spaces where dignity and kindness could flourish, where a man with nothing could teach a millionaire about wealth, and where a simple apple could become a lesson in leadership. The next morning, David Morrison sat in his luxury apartment overlooking the city, still wearing yesterday's trainee uniform. He hadn't bothered changing after his shift, spending the night instead drafting plans on his laptop. The bruised apple from Thomas sat on his desk, a humble centerpiece among scattered papers and executive reports. His phone buzzed incessantly, board members wondering why he'd called an emergency meeting for 9 a.m. They'd grown accustomed to his month-long absences for market research, but an urgent assembly usually meant acquisition news or crisis management. This time, they were in for something entirely different. David arrived at corporate headquarters early, bypassing his corner office and heading straight to the conference room. As board members filtered in, their designer suits and polished presentations ready for whatever emergency had prompted this gathering, they found their CEO still in his store uniform, name tag reading Dave slightly askew. "Ladies and gentlemen," David began, standing before the projected image of store Term 37. "Yesterday I witnessed something that will change the future of Fresh Fare forever." He proceeded to tell them about Thomas, the spilled coffee and the bruised apple. Several board members exchanged worried glances. This wasn't the crisis they'd expected. "For the past month, I've been working as a trainee in our stores," David continued, clicking through photographs he'd taken during his undercover journey. "I thought I was investigating efficiency and performance. Instead, I discovered that we've been measuring success by the wrong metrics entirely." He shared stories from his month in the trenches, Sarah's careful distribution of day-old bread, Miguel's attention to elderly customers, Lisa's quiet leadership in fostering community. Then he revealed something that made several board members sit up straighter. Sales figures showing that store number 37, despite being in a less affluent area, had higher customer loyalty rates than any other location in the chain. "We've been chasing market share while ignoring the very thing that made Fresh Fare successful in the first place, our connection to the community," David explained. He clicked to a new slide, revealing a comprehensive plan titled Fresh Start Initiative. The proposal was bold: converting unused storage space in each store into community centers, partnering with local shelters and food banks, implementing a pay-it-forward program for essential items, and creating job training opportunities for homeless individuals interested in retail or food service work. The budget implications were significant, but David had done his homework. By redirecting 30% of our marketing budget and optimizing our supply chain, we can fund these programs while maintaining profitability, he demonstrated. More importantly, we'll be returning to our roots as a community-centered business. Roger Whitman, The senior board member, known for his focus on quarterly profits, cleared his throat. "David, while this is touching, we have a responsibility to our shareholders. How do you expect to explain that we're cutting marketing to fund homeless shelters?" David had anticipated this question. He pulled up customer survey data from store number 37, showing how community engagement had led to increased customer loyalty and word-of-mouth marketing. "Our best advertising has always been the stories our customers tell about us," he countered. "Yesterday, I watched a homeless man with nothing offer to help a stranger in need. That single act of kindness generated more genuine goodwill than our last 3 marketing campaigns combined." He then revealed another surprise: a series of interviews with long-term customers who'd been helped by the informal support system already existing in their stores. Their stories were powerful testimonials to the impact of community-centered business practices. "We're not just a grocery chain," David insisted, his voice carrying the passion of genuine conviction. "We're part of the fabric of each neighborhood we serve. It's time we started acting like it." The discussion that followed was intense. Some board members saw the potential for positive PR and brand building. Others worried about implementation costs and regulatory complications. But as David shared more stories from his month undercover, particularly the impact of Thomas's simple act of kindness, the mood in the room began to shift. By meeting's end, the board had approved a pilot program for the Fresh Start initiative, beginning with store number 37. David's final proposal, to create a position for a community impact director who would oversee the program's implementation, passed with unexpected support. As the board members filed out, many still processing the morning's revelations, David remained in the conference room, staring at the photo of store number 37 still projected on the screen. He pulled Thomas's apple from his bag, its bruised surface, now a badge of honor rather than a flaw. His assistant poked her head in. "Sir, the PR team is waiting for your decision on next quarter's advertising campaign." David smiled, an idea forming. "Cancel it," he said. "Tell them we're going to let our actions do the talking instead." 3 months after the board meeting, store number 37 had undergone a remarkable transformation. The unused storage space at the back of the building now housed the Community Corner, a bright, welcoming area where local groups could gather, job seekers could access computers, and neighbors could connect. But the real change wasn't in the physical space, it was in the spirit of the store itself. David stood in the early morning light, watching as Lisa trained their newest employee, Thomas. Finding him hadn't been easy. The homeless community's unofficial leader had been reluctant to accept what he viewed as charity, but when David explained that Fresh Fare needed someone who understood community building from the ground up, Thomas had recognized the sincerity in the offer. "We're not hiring you despite your experience on the streets," David had told him. "We're hiring you because of it." Now, as the store's community outreach coordinator, Thomas brought a perspective that no business degree could provide. The morning's activity buzzed around them. Sarah's bakery section had expanded to include a training program for aspiring bakers from the local shelter. The day-old bread section had evolved into a pay-what-you-can corner, where customers could either pay extra to support others or pay what they could afford. Surprisingly, the section consistently showed a profit. People's generosity often exceeded expectations. David watched as a young woman in a business suit, the same one from that transformative morning, dropped off a bag of groceries at the pay-it-forward shelf. She'd become a regular participant in the program, turning that one act of kindness from Thomas into a personal mission to help others. The corporate changes had rippled outward. After store number 37's success, other locations began implementing their own community corners. Employee satisfaction scores rose across the chain and turnover rates dropped significantly. The marketing department, initially concerned about their reduced budget, found themselves overwhelmed with positive press as customers shared their fresh fare stories on social media. But the most profound changes were the small ones, the daily acts of kindness that no spreadsheet could capture. David observed as Thomas guided a nervous young man through filling out a job application, offering the same dignity and respect he'd shown that morning with the bruised apple. "You know," Thomas said later during their weekly community impact meeting, "when I was on the streets, I learned that wealth isn't just about money, it's about what you're willing to share." He pulled out his notebook, the same one David had retrieved from the floor months ago, now filled with ideas for community initiatives. The store had become more than a grocery. It was a hub of community resilience. Local shelters reported that several of their regular residents had found employment through Fresh Fare's program. The community kitchen, operated in partnership with local chefs, served weekly meals that brought together people from all walks of life. One morning, David arrived to find an elderly woman teaching a young businessman how to properly select produce, while a former homeless veteran explained his secret for finding the best deals. The barriers between customer segments had begun to dissolve, replaced by a genuine sense of community. The quarterly earnings report sat on David's desk back at headquarters, showing something remarkable. While marketing expenses had decreased, customer loyalty and repeat business had surged. The Fresh Start initiative had proved that profitability and social responsibility could coexist, each strengthening the other. But the true measure of success wasn't in the numbers. It was in moments like watching Thomas mentor new employees, sharing the wisdom he'd gained from years of street survival. It was in seeing Sarah teach a former hedge fund manager, now homeless after a market crash, the therapeutic art of bread making. It was in the way customers no longer rushed through their shopping, but lingered, connected, and cared. David kept the bruised apple, now dried and preserved, on his desk as a reminder. Next to it sat a framed note from Thomas. "Sometimes the most valuable transactions have nothing to do with money." The story of the undercover boss and the homeless man who changed his perspective had become part of Fresh Fare's company lore, shared during new employee orientations as an example of the company's values. But David knew the real story wasn't about him or even Thomas. It was about the power of seeing people for who they are, not what they own. 1 year to the day after that transformative morning, David stood before a gathering of business leaders at an industry conference. As he shared Fresh Fare's journey, he pulled out a fresh apple, slightly bruised, and placed it on the podium. "Success in business," he told the audience, "isn't just about what you gain. Sometimes it's about what you're willing to give when you have nothing left but kindness. And sometimes the greatest lessons in leadership come from those we least expect to be our teachers." 5 years after that fateful morning at Store the 37, the Fresh Fare revolution had sparked a movement across the retail industry. What began as one homeless man's act of kindness had transformed into a nationwide conversation about corporate responsibility and community engagement. David Morrison stood at the podium of the National Retail Federation's annual conference, where he'd been invited to deliver the keynote address. The massive screen behind him displayed a simple image, a bruised apple, now the symbol of Fresh Fare's community initiative and the logo for their non-profit foundation. "When people ask me about the secret to Fresh Fare's success," David began, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "they expect to hear about our innovative technology, our efficient supply chain, or our marketing strategies. Instead, I tell them about a man named Thomas, who taught me that true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you're willing to share." The Fresh Fare model had indeed become a case study in sustainable business practices. Their Community corners now operated in every store, serving as neighborhood hubs that offered job training, financial literacy classes, and community gathering spaces. The Pay What You Can program had expanded beyond the day-old bread section to include essential items throughout the stores. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't in the stores themselves. It was in the lives touched by the initiative. Thomas, now the National Director of Community Impact for Fresh Fare, had helped develop programs that had assisted over 10,000 homeless individuals in finding employment, not just within Fresh Fare, but across various industries. Sarah's bakery training program had graduated hundreds of students, many of whom had gone on to open their own businesses. Lisa had been promoted to Regional Community Operations Director, overseeing the implementation of social impact programs. Across multiple states, the young woman from that first morning now ran her own non-profit, partnering with Fresh Fare to expand food accessibility programs. The business world had taken notice. Fresh Fare's stock price had doubled as investors recognized the value of community-centered business practices. Employee retention rates were the highest in the industry, and customer loyalty metrics set new standards. Other companies began implementing similar programs, creating a ripple effect of positive change throughout the retail sector. But numbers only tell part of the story, David continued, clicking to a new slide showing a collection of photographs. The real impact is in the moments that can't be quantified. The elderly shopper who finds companionship in our community spaces, the struggling parent who can afford fresh produce through our sliding scale program, the homeless veteran who discovers purpose through our job training initiatives. The presentation shifted to a video montage. Thomas teaching a workshop on community building, Sarah mentoring a group of aspiring bakers, children tending the community gardens that had sprung up behind many stores. The faces in the footage told stories of transformation, dignity, and hope. 5 years ago, I thought I was going undercover to fix my company, David reflected, his voice softening. Instead, I discovered that my company needed to fix its understanding of value. Thomas showed me that true leadership isn't about standing above others, it's about standing with them. The bruised apple that started it all had been bronzed and mounted in Fresh Fare's headquarters lobby, accompanied by Thomas's simple words, "Everyone has something to give." It had become a pillar of the company's training program, with every new employee hearing the story of how a homeless man's generosity transformed a corporation. As David concluded his speech, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a fresh apple, slightly bruised, just like the one from that morning 5 years ago. "This apple represents more than a lesson in leadership," he said, holding it up. "It represents the choice we all face in business and in life. Do we see imperfection as a flaw to be discarded, or as an opportunity to recognize the value in what others might overlook?" The audience rose in a standing ovation, but David's mind was already on tomorrow morning when he would join Thomas for their weekly community breakfast at store number 37. These gatherings, where CEOs sat alongside homeless individuals sharing meals and stories, had become a symbol of what was possible when businesses chose to see people first and profit second. And now, friends, as we wrap up this incredible journey of transformation, I want to hear from you. Has someone's unexpected kindness ever changed your perspective on life? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might inspire others to see the world differently. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to join our community of storytellers and changemakers. Remember, sometimes the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, keep looking for the value in every person you meet and never underestimate the power of a simple act of kindness. If you'd like to support more stories like this, consider sending a super thanks. It helps us continue sharing these powerful messages of hope and transformation. See you in the next video, where we'll explore another extraordinary story that challenges our understanding of success, leadership, and human connection. But this story didn't end with the conference speech or the nationwide impact. What happened next surprised even David Morrison himself. One crisp autumn morning, a decade after that transformative encounter, David arrived at store number 37 for what seemed like a routine visit. The store had become something of a pilgrimage site for business leaders worldwide, eager to understand how a simple grocery store had sparked a global movement in conscious capitalism. As he walked through the automatic doors, David noticed something different. The usual morning bustle was there, but the atmosphere felt charged with anticipation. The community corner was packed, but not with its regular crowd. Instead, he saw faces he recognized from magazines and news headlines, CEOs, social activists, and community leaders from across the country. At the center of it all stood Thomas, now silver-haired, but still radiating that same quiet dignity. He was surrounded by a group of young business school students, their laptops open, taking notes as he shared wisdom that no textbook could provide. The fresh fare model, as it had come to be known, was now being taught in leading business schools worldwide. But today's gathering wasn't about business theory. It was about something far more significant. The United Nations had sent representatives to study the Fresh Fare Community Integration Program. What started as one store's transformation had caught the attention of global policymakers looking for solutions to urban poverty and social disconnection. Delegates from cities across the world had come to learn how a grocery chain had succeeded where traditional social programs had struggled. David watched as Thomas led the group through the store, pointing out details that many might miss. The carefully designed spaces that encouraged natural interaction between different social groups. The subtle ways the store layout promoted dignity for those using assistance programs. The small touches that made everyone feel valued regardless of their circumstances. But the real magic, Thomas explained to his attentive audience, isn't in the programs or the policies. It's in the shift in perspective. We stopped seeing people as customers or categories and started seeing them as community members with something to contribute. The store had evolved in ways neither David nor Thomas could have predicted. The original community corner had expanded to include a business incubator for former homeless individuals starting their own ventures, a teaching kitchen where community members shared cultural recipes and cooking techniques, a digital storytelling center where people could document their journeys of transformation, a mentor matching program pairing business executives with community members. But perhaps the most profound change was in how success was measured. Fresh Fare had developed a new business metric called the Community Impact Index, which measured success not just in profits, but in lives transformed, connections made, and dignity restored. As David stood there, taking in the scene, a young woman approached him. She introduced herself as Maria, daughter of the woman Thomas had helped that fateful morning years ago. She was now pursuing her PhD in social economics, studying how business models like Fresh Fares could reshape urban communities. "You know what's remarkable," Maria said, gesturing to the bustling store around them. "This isn't just a success story anymore. It's become a blueprint for social change. My research shows that when businesses focus on human dignity first, everything else follows: profit, loyalty, innovation, everything." The morning's gathering culminated in an unexpected announcement. The United Nations was launching a global initiative based on the Fresh Fare model, with Thomas and David serving as special advisors. The program would help businesses worldwide transform their spaces into community catalysts. As the announcement concluded, Thomas pulled David aside. From his ever-present backpack, he retrieved something that made David's breath catch, the original notebook that had fallen from his pocket that first morning. Its pages were now filled with a decade of observations, ideas, and wisdom. "I think it's time to share this," Thomas said, handing the notebook to David. "There's a whole new generation of leaders who need to understand that true change doesn't start with grand plans or big budgets. It starts with seeing the value in every person who walks through your door." The notebook would later be digitized and made available as a free resource for businesses worldwide, its margins filled with insights that would inspire countless others to rethink their approach to community engagement. As the day drew to a close, David found himself back in the spot where he'd first met Thomas. The store had changed, the world had changed, but the fundamental truth they'd discovered that morning remained constant. Sometimes the greatest catalyst for change is simply being willing to see the humanity in others. And so, this story that began with a bruised apple had grown into a global movement, proving that when business serves humanity rather than the other way around, everybody wins. 20 years after the morning that changed everything, Store 37 had become more than a grocery store or even a community hub. It had evolved into an educational institution in its own right. The Harvard Business School now operated a satellite research center within the building, studying what they termed the economics of dignity. On this particular morning, David Morrison watched from the back of the community corner as Thomas delivered the opening address at the inaugural World Summit on Compassionate Commerce. The event was being simultaneously translated into 12 languages, broadcast to business schools and corporate boardrooms across the globe. Thomas, now in his 70s, but still carrying himself with that same quiet authority, stood before an audience that included Nobel laureates in economics, social policy architects, and next-generation business leaders. The worn notebook that had fallen from his pocket 2 decades ago had been digitally archived in the Library of Congress, its principles now forming the foundation for a new approach to economic development. "When I offered that bruised apple to a stranger 20 years ago," Thomas began, his voice carrying the weight of wisdom earned through experience, "I didn't know I was starting a revolution in business thinking. I was simply doing what I'd learned during my years on the streets, sharing what little I had, because that's how communities survive." The fresh fare model had spawned an entirely new field of study. Social value economics. Universities worldwide now offered degrees in community-integrated business management, with Store 37 serving as a required case study. The store's original community corner had expanded into a 3-story complex that housed the Institute for Dignity-Based Economics, where scholars and practitioners developed new metrics for measuring business success through social impact. The Institute's research had influenced policy decisions in countries around the world, demonstrating how businesses could serve as catalysts for social healing. The Fresh Fare Academy, a fully accredited business school where every student, regardless of their background, spent their first semester working alongside community members in various store operations. CEOs of Fortune 500 companies regularly enrolled in executive education programs, learning alongside former homeless individuals who often served as their mentors. The Global Community Innovation Lab, where entrepreneurs from developing nations came to study how the Fresh Fare principles could be adapted to their local contexts. The lab had already helped launch similar initiatives in 47 countries, each adapted to local cultural needs while maintaining the core principle of dignity-first commerce. David's attention was drawn to a young woman sitting in the front row of the summit. She was the granddaughter of the businesswoman from that transformative morning, now the newly appointed head of the World Bank's Department of Social Integration Economics. Her doctoral thesis on the multiplier effect of dignity-based business practices had revolutionized how international development projects were evaluated. The summit's main hall displayed an art installation that captured the story's evolution, a holographic projection of a bruised apple that transformed into a globe, showing how the ripple effects of that single act of kindness had spread across continents. Beneath it, a real-time display tracked the number of lives impacted by initiatives. Inspired by the Fresh Fare model, over 50 million and counting. But perhaps the most profound impact was visible in the small moments that occurred daily in stores around the world. The previous week, David had received a video from a Fresh Fare location in Singapore, where a local business leader, inspired by Thomas's story, had created a program that turned grocery stores into bridges between the affluent and struggling communities. Similar stories poured in from Buenos Aires, Nairobi, Mumbai, and countless other cities. The academic world had coined a term for this phenomenon, the Thomas effect, the measurable increase in community resilience and economic stability that occurred when businesses prioritized human dignity over short-term profit. The concept had become so influential that several nations now required companies above a certain size to maintain a dignity impact statement alongside their financial reports. As Thomas concluded his address, he shared a story that brought tears to David's eyes. A group of children from a local elementary school had visited store SUC 37 the previous week for a lesson in community economics. When asked what they wanted to be when they grew up, one young girl had raised her hand and said, "I want to be like Thomas, someone who helps people see their own value." The summit concluded with the announcement of the Thomas Fellowship, a global initiative that would identify and support innovative approaches to dignity-based commerce in underserved communities worldwide. The fellowship would be funded by a consortium of businesses that had successfully implemented the Fresh Fare model, creating a self-sustaining cycle of social innovation. As the attendees filed out, David noticed Thomas standing quietly by the original store entrance, now preserved as a historical landmark. "You know what amazes me most?" Thomas said as David joined him. "It's not the global impact or the academic recognition. It's that somewhere right now, someone is offering their own version of a bruised apple to a stranger, and that simple act is starting another wave of transformation we can't even imagine yet." David smiled, understanding that their story had become something larger than either of them. It had become a template for how humanity could rewrite the rules of commerce to serve the greater good. The bruised apple had grown into a forest of possibility, its seeds scattered across the globe, taking root in the fertile soil of human dignity. 25 years after the transformative morning at store number 37, the location had become the centerpiece of an international movement that transcended business practice to reshape fundamental ideas about human potential and social progress. The United Nations had designated the store as a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its contribution to human social evolution, marking the first time a retail establishment had received such recognition. On this historic morning, David Morrison and Thomas gathered in the original community corner, now part of the Museum of Social Transformation, to review the final draft of their collaborative book, The Economics of Human Dignity. Leading philosophers, economists, and social scientists had contributed chapters examining how a simple act of kindness had catalyzed a fundamental shift in human social organization. The museum's central atrium featured an interactive exhibition titled The Anatomy of Change, which analyzed how the Fresh Fare model had influenced fields far beyond business. Medical schools now included courses on dignity-centered healthcare, inspired by how the model had demonstrated the healing power of human recognition. Law schools had revamped their curricula to include modules on community-integrated justice, drawing direct inspiration from Fresh Fair's approach to conflict resolution. Thomas walked slowly through the exhibition, pausing at a display showing the global network of Community Corner graduates. The screen tracked the careers of individuals who had started in Fresh Fair's programs and gone on to transform other institutions. Former program participants now held positions ranging from university presidents to central bank governors, each carrying forward the principles they had learned at Store 37. The Oxford Dictionary had recently added the term dignity economics to its lexicon, defining it as an approach to commerce and social organization that prioritizes human worth and potential over traditional metrics of value. The concept had spawned entire academic departments at prestigious universities worldwide, with scholars examining how this new paradigm could address challenges ranging from climate change to technological displacement. David observed a group of quantum computing researchers presenting their findings in the Innovation Lab. They had developed algorithms based on the Fresh Fair model's principles of human interaction, creating artificial intelligence systems that could better understand and respond to human needs. The researchers had discovered that incorporating dignity-based principles into AI development led to more ethical and effective human-machine collaboration. The store's original break room had been preserved exactly as it was on that fateful morning, but with an addition, a quantum-enabled holographic system that allowed visitors to experience the emotional journey of both David and Thomas. The installation had been developed by a team of neuroscientists and artists who had mapped the neurological patterns of empathy and transformation, creating what they called experiential empathy training. In the refined atmosphere of the Summit Room, where global leaders regularly gathered to discuss the implementation of dignity-based systems, Thomas shared a revelation that brought the journey full circle. He had recently discovered that the apple he had offered David that morning had come from a tree planted by a homeless veteran decades earlier. The tree had survived urban development because a community had rallied to protect it, creating an unintended sanctuary that would later become the site of Store 37. The Fresh Fair Foundation had since launched the Global Seed Initiative, AEE, program that planted apple trees in communities worldwide as symbols of potential and transformation. Each tree came with a plaque sharing the story of Store 37, but with a twist. The plaques were designed to be updated regularly with stories of how that particular community had created its own ripple effects of positive change. David watched as a group of children from the local school district participated in the museum's Future Leaders program. The program used advanced pedagogical techniques to help young people understand how individual actions could catalyze systemic change. The children were currently engaged in a simulation that allowed them to design their own community transformation projects using principles derived from the Fresh Fair model. The morning's activities were being documented by anthropologists from the Smithsonian Institution, who were conducting a longitudinal study on how the Fresh Fair model had influenced human social evolution. Their preliminary findings suggested that the model had accelerated the development of what they termed cooperative consciousness, a heightened awareness of human interconnectedness and potential. As the morning drew to a close, Thomas and David sat in the quiet of the original store office, surrounded by artifacts from their journey. Thomas pulled out his original notebook, now handled with the care reserved for precious historical documents, and added one final entry. The true measure of transformation isn't in what changes, but in what remains constant, the human capacity for dignity, kindness, and growth. The fresh fare story had become more than a business case study or social movement. It had evolved into a framework for understanding human potential itself. The bruised apple had become a symbol of how perceived imperfection could serve as a catalyst for profound social evolution, leading humanity toward a future where commerce served as a vehicle for human flourishing rather than merely economic gain. 30 years had passed since that transformative morning at store number 37, and on this particular day, the world's attention was focused on an unprecedented gathering at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The General Assembly Hall was filled with delegates from every member nation, assembled to witness the ratification of the Global Dignity Accord, a framework for international commerce and social development directly inspired by the fresh fare model. David Morrison, now in his 80s, sat beside Thomas in the diplomatic gallery. The two men watched as nation after nation signed the accord, committing to integrate dignity-based economics into their national policies. The document's preamble cited store number 37 as the birthplace of a movement that had fundamentally reshaped human social organization in the early 21st century. The World Economic Forum had recently published a comprehensive study demonstrating how regions that had adopted the fresh fare model had experienced not only economic growth, but measurable improvements in social cohesion, mental health outcomes, and environmental sustainability. The data showed that when businesses operated on principles of human dignity, they naturally aligned with the broader needs of society and the planet. In the years following the original transformation, fresh fare had evolved into something far beyond a grocery chain. The company had become a global learning organization, with each store serving as a node in a vast network of social innovation. The original community corner concept had expanded into what scholars now called integration hubs, spaces where commerce, education, social services, and community development seamlessly merged. The most profound impact, however, was evident in how the model had influenced the next generation of leaders. Business schools worldwide had replaced traditional case studies with what they termed dignity narratives, real-world examples of how prioritizing human worth over profit had led to sustainable success. The bruised apple story was now taught alongside historical turning points in human civilization. On this historic morning, Thomas shared a revelation that brought deep meaning to their 30-year journey. He had recently discovered through genetic research that the apple tree that had produced the bruised apple was a descendant of an ancient variety believed to be extinct. The tree had survived against all odds, its fruit slightly imperfect, but carrying resilient genes that scientists now studied for insights into agricultural sustainability. The Fresh Fare Foundation had established the Global Dignity Observatory, a research institution dedicated to tracking and analyzing the long-term effects of dignity-based practices across cultures and contexts. Their findings had led to the development of new economic indicators that measured success through human flourishing rather than traditional metrics alone. In the years since Store or 37's transformation, a new philosophical framework had emerged, which scholars called integral economics. This approach recognized that economic systems were inseparable from human dignity and ecological health. The Fresh Fare model had demonstrated that when businesses operated in alignment with human worth, they naturally generated sustainable prosperity. David and Thomas had collaborated with leading neuroscientists to understand the neurological basis of the transformation they had witnessed. Research had shown that when people were treated with dignity, it activated neural pathways associated with creativity, cooperation, and long-term thinking. The findings had revolutionary implications for everything from education to conflict resolution. The United Nations ceremony included the inauguration of the Global Dignity Institute, housed in a building whose architecture was inspired by the shape of an apple. The institute would serve as a center for research, education, and policy development, ensuring that the lessons learned from the Fresh Fare story would continue to evolve and adapt to future challenges. As the ceremony concluded, Thomas pulled out his original notebook one last time. The worn pages had been digitally archived, but the physical notebook remained a powerful symbol of how simple wisdom could catalyze global change. He added a final entry, writing words that would later be engraved in institutions worldwide. The future of humanity lies not in our systems or structures, but in our capacity to recognize and nurture the dignity in every human being. The Fresh Fare story had transcended its origins to become a template for human social evolution. What began with a bruised apple had grown into a global movement that demonstrated how commerce could serve as a vehicle for human advancement. The model had proven that when businesses aligned with human dignity, they not only succeeded, but helped create a more equitable and sustainable world. David and Thomas's journey had shown that true transformation wasn't about changing systems from the outside, but about recognizing and nurturing the potential for dignity in every interaction. Their legacy lived on, not just in policies or programs, but in the countless small acts of recognition and kindness that occurred daily in communities worldwide. As the delegates filed out of the General Assembly Hall, David and Thomas made their way to a small gathering of next-generation leaders who would carry their work forward. The future would bring new challenges and opportunities, but the fundamental truth they had discovered 30 years ago remained constant. When human dignity becomes the foundation of commerce, the possibilities for positive change are limitless. 40 years after the morning that reshaped human commerce, scholars and spiritual leaders gathered at store number 37 for an unprecedented symposium, exploring what they called the consciousness of commerce. The event coincided with a rare astronomical alignment that seemed to mirror the convergence of ideas the Fresh Fare model had initiated. The original store had become the centerpiece of what urbanists now called a consciousness district, where the principles of dignity-based economics had transformed not just commerce, but the very fabric of human interaction. The NASA Space Psychology Division had recently selected the district as a study site for their research on creating sustainable human communities for future Mars colonization, recognizing that the Fresh Fare model offered insights crucial for humanity's expansion into space. David Morrison and Thomas attended the symposium virtually through advanced holographic technology. Their presence projected from the meditation retreat where they had been documenting the subtle spiritual principles underlying their transformative journey. Their latest collaboration, titled The Quantum Nature of Human Dignity, had sparked a new field of study examining the relationship between consciousness, commerce, and human evolution. The symposium opened with a presentation from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which had conducted a 20-year study on the ripple effects of dignity-based interactions. Their research had revealed something extraordinary. When businesses operated according to Fresh Fare principles, they created what scientists termed coherence fields, measurable patterns of harmony that extended far beyond the physical boundaries of the commercial space. Quantum physicists from CERN had discovered that these coherence fields exhibited properties similar to quantum entanglement, suggesting that human consciousness, when aligned with principles of dignity and compassion, could influence physical reality in ways previously thought impossible. The bruised apple had become more than a symbol. It represented a quantum leap in human social evolution. The Fresh Fare Foundation had established the Center for Evolutionary Commerce, where researchers studied how dignity-based business practices accelerated the development of higher-order consciousness in both individuals and communities. Their findings indicated that when commerce aligned with human dignity, it catalyzed what they termed evolutionary emergence, the spontaneous development of more advanced forms of social organization. In response to these discoveries, the United Nations had created the Department of Consciousness and Commerce, dedicated to understanding and implementing the metaphysical principles underlying successful social transformation. The department's first initiative was the Global Coherence Project, which used advanced sensing technology to measure and map the impact of dignity-based practices on planetary consciousness. The symposium featured a groundbreaking presentation from the Vatican Observatory, where scientists had been studying the mathematical patterns underlying successful implementations of the Fresh Fare model. They had discovered that these patterns corresponded to sacred geometries found throughout nature, suggesting that dignity-based commerce aligned with fundamental principles of universal order. Indigenous leaders from cultures worldwide shared how the Fresh Fare model resonated with their traditional wisdom about human relationship and commerce. They revealed that their ancestors had long understood the principles of dignity-based exchange, viewing commerce as a sacred activity that could either elevate or diminish human consciousness, depending on how it was conducted. The World Economic Forum had integrated these insights into their long-term planning, recognizing that future economic stability depended on understanding the consciousness dimensions of commerce. They had established the Wisdom Economy Initiative, which helped businesses transition from purely material metrics to measures that included consciousness development and spiritual well-being. David and Thomas shared insights from their retreat, explaining how their original interaction had tapped into what mystics called the field of infinite possibility. The bruised apple, they suggested, had served as a gateway to higher consciousness, demonstrating how seemingly ordinary objects could become vehicles for evolutionary transformation when imbued with genuine compassion and recognition. The symposium concluded with the inauguration of the Universal Dignity Observatory, a facility designed to monitor and support the evolution of human consciousness through commerce. The observatory combined advanced technology with ancient wisdom traditions, creating what scientists called a navigation system for human spiritual evolution. As the event drew to a close, Thomas shared a final reflection through the holographic interface. He described how the years of contemplation had revealed that their story was part of a larger pattern of human awakening, where commerce served as a vehicle for spiritual evolution. The Fresh Fare model, he explained, had succeeded because it aligned with fundamental principles of universal consciousness. David added that their journey had revealed something profound about the nature of reality itself, that consciousness, commerce, and human dignity were not separate domains, but different expressions of a unified field of potential. The bruised apple had initiated what physicists now called a consciousness cascade, demonstrating how small acts of recognition could trigger large-scale evolutionary processes. The symposium's findings were transmitted to research centers worldwide, where scientists continued to explore the deeper implications of dignity-based commerce for human evolution. The Fresh Fare story had become a bridge between science and spirituality, showing how practical business principles could align with humanity's highest evolutionary potential. 50 years had passed since the transformative morning at Store 37, and humanity stood at the threshold of a new frontier. The International Space Station had incorporated the first orbital Fresh Fare facility, demonstrating how the principles of dignity-based commerce could facilitate human expansion into the cosmos. The station's community corner, suspended in zero gravity, had become a laboratory for studying how human consciousness evolved in space. The European Space Agency had integrated fresh fare principles into their Mars colonization protocols, recognizing that sustainable human settlements would require more than technical solutions. The concept of dignity-based commerce had proven essential for maintaining psychological well-being during long-duration space missions. Astronauts reported that practicing these principles helped them maintain their humanity in the vast emptiness of space. On Earth, the original star Number 37 had evolved into what scientists called a consciousness accelerator. Advanced quantum sensing equipment had detected unusual patterns of coherence emanating from the site. Researchers from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology had documented how visitors to the store experienced measurable shifts in consciousness, regardless of whether they knew its history. The Fresh Fare Foundation had partnered with CERN to establish the Quantum Dignity Research Center, where scientists studied the relationship between human consciousness, commerce, and the fundamental structure of the universe. Their groundbreaking research suggested that acts of genuine recognition, like Thomas's offering of the bruised apple, created ripples in the quantum field that influenced future possibilities. David Morrison and Thomas had become the subjects of a longitudinal study conducted by the Institute for Advanced Consciousness Studies. Researchers had discovered that their original interaction had created what quantum physicists termed a consciousness entanglement that continued to influence global events decades later. The bruised apple had initiated what scientists now called a quantum cascade of compassion. The United Nations Space Affairs Division had incorporated these findings into their protocols for first contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. The Fresh Fare model provided a framework for understanding how advanced societies might structure their economic systems around principles of universal dignity. Astrobiologists suggested that any sufficiently evolved civilization would naturally discover similar principles. In response to these developments, the World Economic Forum had established the Department of Cosmic Commerce, dedicated to understanding how dignity-based economics might function across interplanetary societies. Their research indicated that the principles discovered at Star Number 37 represented universal laws of social organization that transcended planetary boundaries. The original apple tree, whose fruit had catalyzed this global transformation, had been studied by geneticists who discovered unprecedented properties in its DNA. The tree exhibited what they termed adaptive consciousness, an ability to respond to human intention in ways that defied conventional understanding of plant biology. Seeds from this tree were now part of humanity's repository of essential genetic material for space colonization. Thomas and David had collaborated with quantum computing experts to create what they called the dignity algorithm, a mathematical expression of the principles that had emerged from their interaction. This algorithm had proven remarkably effective at optimizing social systems for human flourishing, leading to its integration into artificial intelligence systems designed for space exploration. The Fresh Fare model had influenced the development of what scientists termed consciousness technology, tools and systems designed to facilitate human evolution through commerce. These technologies, based on principles of recognition and dignity, were being prepared for deployment in the first human settlements on Mars. As humanity stood on the brink of becoming a multiplanetary species, the lessons learned from Star Number 37 had become more relevant than ever. The experience had demonstrated that sustainable expansion into space would require more than technological advancement. It would demand a fundamental understanding of how commerce could serve as a vehicle for consciousness evolution. David and Thomas had worked with the Planetary Science Division to document how their original interaction provided insights into the nature of universal consciousness. Their findings suggested that the principles of dignity-based commerce represented fundamental laws of social physics as essential to human flourishing as gravity was to planetary motion. The symposium concluded with the announcement of the Interplanetary Dignity Initiative, a program designed to ensure that human expansion into space would be guided by principles of consciousness and recognition. The initiative would integrate the lessons of STOR Factor 37 into humanity's first steps toward becoming a spacefaring civilization. 60 years after the transformative morning at STOR Factor 37, humanity faced its greatest technological challenge yet. The advent of artificial general intelligence had brought society to a crucial crossroads, and the principles discovered through the fresh fare model had become unexpectedly central to navigating this new frontier. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology had established the Center for Conscious Computing, where researchers discovered that the principles of dignity-based interaction provided essential frameworks for developing ethical AI systems. The center's breakthrough came when they integrated Thomas's original notebook entries into their machine learning algorithms, creating what they termed consciousness-aware computing. David Morrison and Thomas had been invited to participate in a groundbreaking experiment at the Quantum Computing Research Institute. Scientists had developed a quantum computer capable of processing information through what they called dignity matrices, mathematical structures based on the patterns of human recognition first observed in STOR Factor 37. The results had revolutionized our understanding of both technology and consciousness. The Fresh Fare Foundation had partnered with leading technology companies to create the Global Dignity Network, a quantum-encrypted system that used consciousness-based protocols to ensure that technological advancement served human flourishing. The network had become the backbone of a new kind of internet, one that operated on principles of recognition and mutual dignity rather than mere data exchange. The original apple tree's DNA had provided unexpected insights into biological computing. Scientists at the Biotech Consciousness Laboratory had discovered that the tree's cellular structure exhibited patterns remarkably similar to advanced quantum computing architectures. This finding had led to the development of bioquantum computers that integrated organic and technological elements in ways that maintained human dignity at their core. The United Nations Technology Council had adopted what they called the Fresh Fare Protocol for Artificial Intelligence Development. The protocol required all AI systems to incorporate dignity recognition algorithms based on the principles that had emerged from Thomas and David's interaction. These systems demonstrated remarkable abilities to understand and support human psychological well-being. Harvard's School of Technological Ethics had documented how the Fresh Fare model provided crucial insights into managing the approaching technological singularity. Their research showed that systems developed according to dignity-based principles naturally aligned with human values, creating what they termed conscious convergence between biological and artificial intelligence. The World Economic Forum's Department of Conscious Technology had integrated these findings into their global development strategies. They discovered that when technological advancement was guided by principles of human dignity, it naturally evolved in ways that enhanced rather than diminished human consciousness. The Fresh Fare model had become a blueprint for ensuring that technological progress served humanity's highest potential. Thomas and David had worked with quantum physicists to develop what they called consciousness interfaces, systems that could translate the principles of dignity-based interaction into technological protocols. These interfaces had become essential components of advanced AI systems, ensuring that artificial intelligence developed in harmony with human consciousness rather than in opposition to it. The Technological Dignity Institute had emerged as a leading center for studying how the principles discovered at Store Num 37 could guide humanity's approach to artificial general intelligence. Their research demonstrated that consciousness-aware computing, based on principles of recognition and dignity, provided a path toward technological advancement that enhanced rather than threatened human flourishing. As humanity approached the technological singularity, the lessons learned from the fresh fare model had become more relevant than ever. The experience had shown that sustainable technological advancement required more than algorithmic sophistication. It demanded a fundamental understanding of how technology could serve as a vehicle for consciousness evolution. The Institute had established the Consciousness Computing Laboratory, where researchers studied how the principles of dignity-based interaction could be integrated into quantum computing systems. Their findings suggested that these principles represented fundamental laws of information processing, as essential to conscious computing as binary code was to classical computing. The symposium concluded with the announcement of the Global Technology Dignity Initiative, a program designed to ensure that technological advancement would be guided by principles of consciousness and recognition. The initiative would integrate the lessons of Store Num 37 into humanity's approach to artificial intelligence and technological evolution. 70 years after the transformative morning at Store Num 37, the principles of dignity-based commerce had catalyzed an unprecedented environmental awakening. The United Nations Environmental Council had documented how the fresh fare model's emphasis on recognition and dignity had naturally extended to humanity's relationship with the natural world, leading to what environmentalists termed the Great Restoration. The Stanford Environmental Research Center had established the Biosphere Consciousness Initiative, where scientists studied how the principles first observed in the interaction between Thomas and David had profound implications for ecological sustainability. Their research revealed that when businesses operated according to dignity-based principles, they naturally aligned with environmental regeneration rather than exploitation. The original apple tree had become the centerpiece of what botanists called the conscious agriculture movement. Scientists at the Global Seed Vault had discovered that plants grown according to dignity-based farming practices exhibited remarkable resilience and nutritional properties. The Fresh Fare Foundation's Agricultural Research Division had documented how recognition-based farming methods led to unprecedented soil regeneration and biodiversity enhancement. David Morrison and Thomas had collaborated with environmental scientists to develop what they called the ecology of dignity, a comprehensive framework for understanding how human consciousness influenced environmental systems. Their work demonstrated that when commerce operated according to principles of recognition and dignity, it naturally fostered ecological restoration rather than degradation. The World Wildlife Fund had integrated fresh fare principles into their conservation strategies, discovering that when local communities applied dignity-based commerce to their relationship with wildlife, both human and animal populations thrived. They termed this approach conscious conservation, and it had led to remarkable recoveries of endangered species worldwide. The Environmental Protection Agency had documented how businesses operating according to fresh fare principles naturally developed what they called regenerative commerce practices. These organizations consistently made decisions that enhanced rather than depleted environmental resources, demonstrating that profit and planetary health could align when guided by principles of dignity and recognition. Harvard School of Environmental Sciences had established the Center for Conscious Ecology, where researchers studied how the principles discovered at store number 37 provided crucial insights into managing climate change. Their findings showed that when communities implemented dignity-based commerce, they naturally developed climate-positive behaviors and technologies. The fresh fare model had influenced the development of what scientists termed consciousness-based environmental technology, systems and practices that integrated human awareness with ecological restoration. These approaches had proven remarkably effective at reversing environmental degradation while enhancing human flourishing. Thomas and David had worked with climate scientists to create what they called dignity-based sustainability metrics, new ways of measuring environmental impact that incorporated consciousness and recognition. These metrics had become standard tools for assessing and guiding ecological restoration projects worldwide. The Global Environmental Trust had established the Dignity-Based Conservation Network, a worldwide system of protected areas managed according to principles of recognition and consciousness. These areas had demonstrated unprecedented rates of ecological recovery while supporting sustainable human communities. As humanity faced the ongoing challenges of environmental restoration, the lessons learned from the fresh fare model had become increasingly relevant. The experience had demonstrated that sustainable environmental practices required more than technical solutions. They demanded a fundamental shift in how humans recognized and valued the natural world. The Institute for Environmental Consciousness had documented how the principles of dignity-based interaction provided essential frameworks for reimagining humanity's relationship with nature. Their research showed that when commerce aligned with consciousness and recognition, it naturally fostered ecological regeneration. The symposium concluded with the announcement of the Global Environmental Dignity Initiative, a program designed to ensure that environmental restoration would be guided by principles of consciousness and recognition. The initiative would integrate the lessons of Store Number 37 into humanity's approach to ecological regeneration and environmental stewardship. 80 years had passed since the transformative morning at Store Number 37, and humanity stood at the threshold of what philosophers termed the Great Convergence. The Princeton Institute for Advanced Studies had documented how the fresh fare model had catalyzed an unprecedented integration of consciousness, commerce, technology, and environmental stewardship, leading to what scholars now called the universal synthesis. The original Store Number 37 had evolved into the Global Center for Integrated Consciousness, where researchers from diverse fields studied the profound implications of dignity-based principles across all domains of human experience. The facility now housed what scientists described as a consciousness field generator, utilizing quantum technology to amplify and study the patterns of recognition first observed in Thomas and David's interaction. David Morrison and Thomas had collaborated with a multidisciplinary team of researchers to develop the unified theory of conscious commerce, a comprehensive framework that demonstrated how dignity-based principles operated consistently across scales, from individual interactions to planetary systems. Their work revealed that the bruised apple incident had initiated what complexity theorists called a consciousness cascade, triggering synchronized evolutionary processes across multiple domains. The International Academy of Sciences had established the Department of Integral Studies, where researchers documented how the fresh fare model provided a template for what they termed holistic emergence, the simultaneous evolution of human consciousness, technological capability, and ecological restoration. Their findings demonstrated that when commerce aligned with dignity-based principles, it naturally fostered development across all sectors of human civilization. The World Economic Forum had integrated these insights into their long-term planning. Through the establishment of the Global Synthesis Initiative, this program coordinated worldwide efforts to implement dignity-based principles across education, healthcare, technology, environmental restoration, and space exploration. The initiative had documented how these principles created self-reinforcing cycles of positive development. The United Nations Development Programme had created the Universal Dignity Index, a new metric for measuring human progress that integrated consciousness development, technological advancement, environmental regeneration, and social well-being. Nations implementing fresh, fair principles consistently demonstrated unprecedented improvements across all indicators. Harvard's Center for Future Studies had documented how the principles discovered at Store Number 37 provided essential guidance for managing what they called civilizational phase transitions, periods of rapid, simultaneous advancement across multiple domains of human experience. Their research showed that dignity-based approaches naturally facilitated smooth transitions while preventing potential disruptions. The Fresh Fair Foundation had established the Synthesis Research Network, connecting laboratories worldwide that studied how consciousness, technology, and ecology interacted under dignity-based frameworks. Their findings revealed that these principles represented fundamental laws of civilizational development, as essential to human flourishing as physical laws were to the universe's operation. Thomas and David had worked with quantum physicists to develop what they called field theory of conscious commerce, a mathematical framework describing how recognition-based interactions influence the development of complex systems across scales. This theory had become instrumental in designing integrated approaches to planetary challenges. The Global Synthesis Laboratory had documented how the Fresh Fair model's principles manifested consistently across different cultures, technologies, and ecosystems. Their research demonstrated that these principles represented universal patterns of healthy development, transcending specific contexts while maintaining their essential effectiveness. As humanity approached what futurists termed civilizational maturity, the lessons learned from Store 37 had become more relevant than ever. The experience had demonstrated that sustainable development required more than isolated solutions. It demanded a fundamental understanding of how consciousness, commerce, technology, and ecology could evolve together in harmony. The Institute for Civilizational Development had established the Integral Solutions Center, where researchers studied how dignity-based principles could guide humanity through increasingly complex challenges. Their work showed that these principles provided reliable navigation tools for managing simultaneous advancement across multiple domains. The symposium concluded with the announcement of the Universal Synthesis Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to ensure that human development would be guided by integrated principles of consciousness and recognition. The initiative would incorporate the lessons of Store Mug 37 into humanity's approach to managing complex civilizational challenges while maintaining focus on individual dignity and worth. 90 years after the transformative morning at Store 37, the world gathered to witness an extraordinary event. The Global Education Council had designated this day as Universal Dignity Day, marking nearly a century of evolution in human consciousness that began with a simple act of kindness between a homeless man and an undercover CEO. The Cambridge Institute for Future Studies had established the Intergenerational Impact Assessment Center, where researchers documented how the Fresh Fair model had fundamentally altered the trajectory of human development. Their longitudinal studies revealed that children born into communities practicing dignity-based principles demonstrated unprecedented levels of emotional intelligence, innovative thinking, and social cohesion. David Morrison and Thomas had collaborated with developmental psychologists to create what they called the Heritage Protocol, a comprehensive framework for transmitting consciousness-based principles to future generations. This work demonstrated how the simple truth discovered in their initial interaction could be preserved and enhanced across time, ensuring that each new generation built upon rather than diluted these essential insights. The World Heritage Committee had designated the original Fresh Fare notebook as a living cultural treasure, recognizing its unique role in human social evolution. The document, now preserved through advanced quantum archival technology, continued to generate new insights as each generation interpreted its wisdom through their unique perspective and challenges. The International Youth Congress had integrated Fresh Fare principles into what they termed future conscious education, a revolutionary approach to learning that emphasized the development of dignity recognition capabilities alongside traditional academic skills. Schools implementing these methods reported extraordinary improvements in student well-being, creative problem-solving, and social harmony. The Fresh Fare Foundation had established the Tomorrow's Leaders Initiative, a global program that identified and nurtured young individuals who demonstrated particular aptitude for dignity-based leadership. These dignity pioneers, as they came to be known, were already developing innovative applications of Fresh Fare principles in fields ranging from interplanetary commerce to quantum consciousness studies. Harvard's Center for Generational Studies had documented how the principles discovered at Store 37 provided essential guidance for what they called evolutionary succession, the process by which each generation built upon and enhanced the consciousness developments of their predecessors. Their research showed that dignity-based approaches naturally facilitated this progression while preventing the loss of crucial wisdom. The United Nations Future Council had created the Dignity Heritage Program, ensuring that the insights gained from the Fresh Fare model would be preserved and transmitted not just across generations, but across potential civilizations. The program included provisions for sharing these principles with extraterrestrial intelligence, should such contact occur. Thomas and David had worked with consciousness researchers to develop what they called temporal field theory, a framework describing how dignity-based principles influence the development of human potential across time. This theory had become instrumental in designing educational and social systems that enhanced rather than diminished human consciousness across generations. The Global Youth Academy had documented how Fresh Fare principles manifested uniquely in each new generation while maintaining their essential truth. Their research demonstrated that these principles represented fundamental patterns of human development that remained relevant despite massive technological and social changes. As humanity prepared for what futurists called the millennial transition, the lessons learned from Store 37 had become more vital than ever. The experience had shown that sustainable human development required more than technological or social innovation. It demanded a fundamental understanding of how consciousness could be preserved and enhanced across generations. The Institute for Heritage Preservation had established the Future Consciousness Center, where researchers studied how dignity-based principles could guide humanity through upcoming civilizational challenges while ensuring that essential wisdom was not lost in the process. Their work showed that these principles provided reliable methods for maintaining human dignity across profound social and technological transformations. The symposium concluded with the inauguration of the Eternal Dignity Initiative, a program designed to ensure that the consciousness developments catalyzed by the Fresh Fare model would continue to evolve and adapt across future generations. The initiative would integrate the lessons of Store Number 37 into humanity's approach to long-term species development while maintaining focus on individual worth and dignity. 100 years after the transformative morning at Store Number 37, the scientific community had made an extraordinary discovery. The Princeton Advanced Physics Laboratory had detected what they termed consciousness resonance patterns emanating from the original Store location, matching precisely the quantum signatures observed in advanced meditation states and moments of profound universal insight. The Institute for Consciousness Studies had established the Quantum Recognition Laboratory, where researchers documented how the fresh fair model had inadvertently tapped into fundamental properties of universal consciousness. Their groundbreaking research revealed that the interaction between Thomas and David had created what quantum physicists called a consciousness anchor point, a stable reference in the fabric of reality that continued to influence the development of human awareness. David Morrison and Thomas had worked with theoretical physicists to develop the unified field theory of consciousness, demonstrating how their simple act of recognition had accessed what scientists now understood as the underlying consciousness substrate of the universe. This work provided mathematical proof that dignity-based interactions created stable patterns in the quantum field that facilitated the evolution of consciousness across all scales of reality. The International Consciousness Research Center had documented how the principles discovered at Store the 37 aligned perfectly with ancient wisdom traditions while satisfying the rigorous requirements of modern quantum mechanics. Their findings suggested that the fresh fair model had inadvertently rediscovered what mystics had known for millennia, that recognition and dignity were fundamental properties of universal consciousness. The Fresh Fair Foundation had partnered with CERN to establish the Universal Consciousness Observatory, utilizing advanced quantum detection equipment to study how dignity-based interactions influence the fundamental structure of reality. Their research demonstrated that these interactions created what physicists termed consciousness coherence fields, that enhance the development of awareness and understanding throughout the surrounding space-time continuum. Harvard's Department of Quantum Psychology had incorporated these findings into what they called field theory of human development, showing how consciousness-based principles naturally aligned individual human growth with universal evolutionary processes. Their work revealed that dignity-based interactions created resonant fields that facilitated the natural unfoldment of human potential in harmony with cosmic development. The World Consciousness Council had documented how fresh fair principles provided essential insights into what they termed universal harmony dynamics, the processes by which consciousness evolved across all scales of existence. Their research showed that these principles represented fundamental patterns of consciousness development that operated consistently from quantum to cosmic scales. Thomas and David had collaborated with consciousness researchers to develop resonance theory of social evolution, demonstrating how dignity-based interactions created self-reinforcing fields of positive development that naturally aligned with universal principles of consciousness evolution. This theory had become instrumental in designing social systems that enhanced rather than impeded the natural development of human awareness. The Global Consciousness Project had established monitoring stations worldwide to study what they called dignity field effects, measurable changes in quantum coherence patterns that occurred when communities implemented fresh fair principles. Their findings revealed that these implementations created stable fields of enhanced consciousness that facilitated positive development throughout the affected regions. As humanity approached what physicists termed universal consciousness integration, the lessons learned from Store the 37 had become more relevant than ever. The experience had demonstrated that sustainable consciousness development required more than individual effort. It demanded an understanding of how human awareness could align with universal principles of consciousness evolution. The Institute for Universal Studies had established the Consciousness Integration Center, where researchers studied how dignity-based principles could guide humanity through the process of conscious integration with universal awareness. Their work showed that these principles provided reliable methods for maintaining individual identity while facilitating expansion into higher states of consciousness. The symposium concluded with the announcement of the Universal Consciousness Initiative, a program designed to ensure that human consciousness development would align with fundamental principles of universal awareness. The initiative would integrate the lessons of STOR 37 into humanity's approach to consciousness evolution while maintaining focus on individual dignity and worth. 110 years after the transformative morning at STOR 37, the implementation of consciousness-based principles had reached a critical milestone. The International Institute for Practical Wisdom had documented how the fresh fare model had evolved from theoretical understanding to practical application across all sectors of human society. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology had established the Center for Applied Consciousness, where researchers demonstrated how the principles discovered through Thomas and David's interaction could be systematically implemented in organizational structures. Their work revealed that when institutions integrated dignity-based approaches into their operational frameworks, they naturally developed what researchers termed consciousness-enhanced efficiency. David Morrison and Thomas had collaborated with organizational psychologists to develop the Practical Consciousness Implementation Framework, a comprehensive system for translating abstract principles of dignity and recognition into concrete organizational practices. This framework provided specific methodologies for institutions ranging from small businesses to global corporations to integrate consciousness-based approaches into their daily operations. The World Business Council had documented how companies implementing fresh fare principles experienced what they called integrated optimization, simultaneous improvements in operational efficiency, employee satisfaction, and social impact. Their research demonstrated that consciousness-based approaches naturally aligned practical business needs with higher principles of human development. The Fresh Fare Foundation had partnered with leading management consultancies to establish the Global Implementation Network, a system for helping organizations transition to consciousness-based operational models. Their work showed that when properly implemented, these principles created self-reinforcing cycles of improvement that enhanced both practical outcomes and human development. Stanford School of Organizational Development had incorporated these findings into what they termed consciousness-based management theory, demonstrating how dignity-based principles could be systematically applied to enhance organizational performance while promoting human flourishing. Their research revealed that these approaches created more resilient and adaptive organizations capable of navigating complex challenges while maintaining human dignity. The International Standards Organization had developed the Consciousness Integration Protocol, a comprehensive framework for assessing and implementing dignity-based principles in organizational settings. This protocol had become the global standard for institutions seeking to align practical operations with higher principles of consciousness development. Thomas and David had worked with systems engineers to create what they called the Practical Dignity Matrix, a detailed methodology for translating consciousness-based principles into specific organizational practices. This system had proven remarkably effective at helping institutions maintain focus on human dignity while achieving practical objectives. The Global Implementation Council had documented how organizations applying fresh fare principles experienced what they termed practical transcendence, the ability to maintain high levels of operational effectiveness while facilitating consciousness development among their stakeholders. Their findings showed that these principles provided reliable methods for balancing practical needs with higher human development. As organizations worldwide faced increasingly complex challenges, the lessons learned from STOR such as 37 had become more relevant than ever. The experience had demonstrated that practical success required more than technical efficiency. It demanded an understanding of how consciousness principles could be integrated into daily operations. The Institute for Practical Wisdom had established the Implementation Sciences Center, where researchers studied how dignity-based principles could guide organizations through complex transformations while maintaining operational effectiveness. Their work showed that these principles provided reliable methods for achieving practical objectives while promoting consciousness development. The symposium concluded with the launch of the Global Integration Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to help organizations worldwide implement consciousness-based principles in their daily operations. The initiative would integrate the lessons of STOR 37 into practical organizational frameworks while maintaining focus on human dignity and development. 120 years after the transformative morning at STOR 37, the worldwide implementation of consciousness-based principles had achieved unprecedented synchronization. The Global Harmonization Institute had documented how the Fresh Fare model had evolved into a comprehensive system for aligning individual development with institutional transformation across cultural and geographical boundaries. The Oxford Institute for Advanced Studies had established the Center for Systemic Integration, where researchers demonstrated how the principles discovered through Thomas and David's interaction created what they termed synchronized development patterns across different scales of human organization. Their research revealed that when properly implemented, these principles generated self-reinforcing cycles of improvement that simultaneously enhanced individual growth and institutional effectiveness. David Morrison and Thomas had collaborated with systems theorists to develop the Global Integration Framework, a sophisticated methodology for implementing consciousness-based principles across diverse cultural contexts while maintaining their essential effectiveness. This framework provided detailed protocols for harmonizing individual development with institutional transformation, ensuring that personal growth and organizational evolution remained mutually reinforcing. The International Development Council had documented how regions implementing Fresh Fare principles experienced what they called harmonic development, the simultaneous advancement of individual consciousness and institutional capability. Their research demonstrated that these principles created natural alignment between personal growth and systemic evolution, leading to more resilient and adaptive social systems. The Fresh Fare Foundation had partnered with international development agencies to establish the World Integration Network, a global system for coordinating the implementation of consciousness-based principles across different societies and cultures. Their work revealed that when properly adapted to local contexts, these principles maintained their effectiveness while respecting cultural diversity. The London School of Economics had incorporated these findings into what they termed harmonic development theory, showing how dignity-based principles could systematically align individual and institutional development across diverse social contexts. Their research demonstrated that these approaches created more integrated and resilient societies, capable of navigating complex challenges while maintaining human dignity. The United Nations Development Programme had established the Global Harmonization Protocol, a comprehensive framework for implementing dignity-based principles across different social and cultural contexts. This protocol had become the international standard for nations seeking to align individual development with institutional transformation. Thomas and David had worked with cultural anthropologists to create what they called the cultural integration matrix, a sophisticated methodology for adapting consciousness-based principles to diverse social contexts while maintaining their essential effectiveness. This system had proven remarkably successful at helping societies implement these principles while preserving their unique cultural identities. The World Integration Council had documented how societies implementing fresh fare principles experienced what they termed developmental resonance, the natural alignment of individual growth with institutional evolution. Their findings showed that these principles provided reliable methods for harmonizing personal development with systemic transformation. As the global community faced increasingly complex challenges, the lessons learned from Store Thunder 37 had become more relevant than ever. The experience had demonstrated that sustainable development required more than technical solutions. It demanded an understanding of how consciousness principles could align individual growth with institutional evolution. The Institute for Global Development had established the Harmonization Sciences Center, where researchers studied how dignity-based principles could guide societies through complex transformations while maintaining cultural integrity. Their work showed that these principles provided reliable methods for achieving systemic development while promoting individual consciousness evolution. The symposium concluded with the inauguration of the World Harmonization Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to help societies worldwide implement consciousness-based principles in ways that respected cultural diversity while maintaining universal effectiveness. The initiative would integrate the lessons of Store Number 37 into global development frameworks while preserving focus on individual dignity and cultural integrity. 130 years after the transformative morning at Store Number 37, humanity had reached what scholars termed the universal integration point. The Global Synthesis Institute had documented how the fresh fare model had evolved into a comprehensive framework for understanding the fundamental nature of human development and societal transformation. The Institute for Advanced Consciousness Studies had established the Universal Integration Center, where researchers demonstrated how the principles discovered through Thomas and David's interaction represented what they called fundamental patterns of evolutionary development. Their research revealed that these principles operated consistently across all scales of human organization, from individual consciousness to global systems. David Morrison and Thomas had collaborated with leading scientists to develop the Universal Development Framework, a comprehensive system that demonstrated how their original interaction had inadvertently accessed fundamental laws of human and societal evolution. This framework provided detailed evidence that dignity-based principles represented essential patterns of development that remained consistent across time, culture, and scale. The World Development Council had documented how societies implementing fresh fare principles experienced what they termed evolutionary coherence, the natural alignment of all aspects of human development with universal principles of growth and transformation. Their research demonstrated that these principles created self-organizing patterns of positive development that enhanced all aspects of human experience. The Fresh Fare Foundation had partnered with global research institutions to establish the Universal Development Network, a worldwide system for studying and implementing consciousness-based principles across all domains of human activity. Their work revealed that when properly understood and applied, these principles naturally fostered optimal development in every area they touched. Cambridge University had incorporated these findings into what they termed integral evolution theory, showing how dignity-based principles represented fundamental patterns of development that operated consistently across all aspects of human experience. Their research demonstrated that these approaches created more integrated and resilient systems at every level of organization. The United Nations Development Programme had established the Universal Integration Protocol, a comprehensive framework for implementing dignity-based principles across all domains of human activity. This protocol had become the global standard for understanding and facilitating human development at all scales. Thomas and David had worked with development theorists to create what they called the evolution matrix, a sophisticated methodology for understanding how consciousness-based principles operated across different domains and scales of human experience. This system had proven remarkably effective at helping organizations and societies implement these principles while maintaining their essential integrity. The Global Integration Council had documented how implementations of fresh fare principles demonstrated what they termed developmental universality, the consistent effectiveness of these principles across all contexts and scales. Their findings showed that these principles provided reliable methods for enhancing development in any setting where they were properly applied. As humanity faced the challenges of continued evolution, the lessons learned from Store Number 37 had become more relevant than ever. The experience had demonstrated that sustainable development required more than isolated solutions. It demanded an understanding of fundamental principles that operated consistently across all aspects of human experience. The Institute for Universal Development had established the Integration Sciences Center, where researchers studied how dignity-based principles represented fundamental patterns of evolution that could guide human development at all scales. Their work showed that these principles provided reliable methods for enhancing all aspects of human experience while maintaining essential integrity. The symposium concluded with the announcement of the Universal Integration Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to help humanity understand and implement consciousness-based principles across all domains of experience. The initiative would integrate the lessons of Store the 37 into a universal framework for human development while maintaining focus on individual dignity and worth. 140 years after the transformative morning at Store the 37, humanity had achieved what philosophers and scientists termed the Great Harmonization. The World Institute for Advanced Studies had documented how the fresh fare model had evolved into a comprehensive understanding of the fundamental unity underlying all aspects of human experience and development. The Princeton Center for Unified Studies had established the Universal Harmony Laboratory, where researchers demonstrated how the principles discovered through Thomas and David's interaction had accessed what they called fundamental patterns of universal development. Their groundbreaking research revealed that these principles represented essential aspects of reality itself, operating consistently across all domains of existence, from quantum fields to cosmic structures. David Morrison and Thomas had collaborated with leading theoretical physicists to develop the Universal Harmony Framework, a comprehensive system that demonstrated how their original interaction had inadvertently accessed fundamental laws of reality. This framework provided mathematical proof that dignity-based principles represented essential patterns of existence that remained consistent across all scales of organization, from subatomic particles to galactic clusters. The International Council for Advanced Research had documented how implementations of fresh fare principles demonstrated what they termed universal resonance, the natural alignment of all aspects of reality with fundamental principles of harmony and development. Their research showed that these principles created self-organizing patterns of positive evolution that enhanced all aspects of existence. The Fresh Fair Foundation had partnered with CERN and other leading research institutions to establish the Global Harmony Network, a worldwide system for studying and implementing consciousness-based principles across all domains of reality. Their work revealed that when properly understood and applied, these principles naturally fostered optimal development at every level of existence. The California Institute of Technology had incorporated these findings into what they termed unified field theory of development, showing how dignity-based principles represented fundamental patterns of reality that operated consistently across all scales and domains. Their research demonstrated that these approaches created more integrated and resilient systems at every level of organization, from quantum systems to human societies. The United Nations Scientific Council had established the Universal Harmony Protocol, a comprehensive framework for understanding and implementing dignity-based principles across all domains of existence. This protocol had become the global standard for understanding and facilitating development at all scales, from individual consciousness to cosmic evolution. Thomas and David had worked with quantum physicists to create what they called the Harmony Matrix, a sophisticated methodology for understanding how consciousness-based principles operated across different scales and domains of reality. This system had proven remarkably effective at helping humanity understand and implement these principles while maintaining their essential integrity. The World Harmony Council had documented how implementations of Fresh Fair principles demonstrated what they termed universal coherence, the consistent effectiveness of these principles across all contexts and scales of reality. Their findings showed that these principles provided reliable methods for enhancing development in any setting where they were properly understood and applied. As humanity faced the challenges of continued cosmic evolution, the lessons learned from Store Number 37 had become more relevant than ever. The experience had demonstrated that sustainable development required more than isolated solutions. It demanded an understanding of fundamental principles that operated consistently across all aspects of reality. The Institute for Universal Harmony had established the Coherent Sciences Center, where researchers studied how dignity-based principles represented fundamental patterns of reality that could guide development at all scales. Their work showed that these principles provided reliable methods for enhancing all aspects of existence while maintaining essential integrity and coherence. The symposium concluded with the announcement of the Universal Harmony Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to help humanity understand and implement consciousness-based principles across all domains of reality. The initiative would integrate the lessons of Store Number 37 into a universal framework for development while maintaining focus on the essential dignity and worth inherent in all aspects of existence. 150 years after that transformative morning at Store Number 37, humanity gathered for a profound celebration of what had become known as the moment of recognition. The World Council for Human Development had designated the original Store location as humanity's first consciousness heritage site, acknowledging how a simple act of kindness had catalyzed unprecedented human development. On this historic morning, as the sun rose over the preserved storefront, holographic projections displayed scenes from the decades of transformation that had followed Thomas and David's interaction. The images showed how a single act of recognition between two individuals had sparked a cascade of positive change that had reshaped human civilization. The original apple tree, now preserved through advanced biotechnology, still stood in its place, its branches bearing fruit that geneticists had proven carried unique properties of resilience and adaptation. Scientists had discovered that the tree's DNA contained patterns matching those found in advanced quantum computing systems and cosmic structures, suggesting a deeper order underlying all of reality. David Morrison and Thomas's story had become part of humanity's essential wisdom, taught not just as history, but as a fundamental lesson in human potential. Their interaction had demonstrated how individual moments of genuine recognition could access deeper patterns of reality that enhanced all aspects of existence. The fresh fair model had evolved into what scholars now called the Universal Recognition Framework, a comprehensive system for understanding how consciousness, commerce, and human dignity interacted to create positive development at all scales. This framework had proven essential in guiding humanity through multiple transformations while maintaining focus on individual worth and dignity. As humanity stood on the brink of its next great evolution, preparing for expansion into the cosmos and integration with advanced consciousness technologies, the lessons learned from STOR W37 remained more relevant than ever. The experience had shown that sustainable development required more than technological advancement or social innovation. It demanded a fundamental understanding of how human dignity and recognition could enhance all aspects of existence. The symposium concluded with a simple ceremony that echoed the original interaction between Thomas and David. A young student representing the next generation of humanity offered a bruised apple to an elder, symbolizing the eternal truth that had emerged from their story. True value lies not in external perfection, but in the recognition of inherent worth in every aspect of existence. As the ceremony ended, the assembled leaders of humanity formalized what they called the eternal commitment, a pledge to maintain focus on human dignity and recognition as fundamental principles guiding all future development. This commitment would ensure that as humanity continued to evolve and expand, it would never lose sight of the essential truth discovered in that simple moment of recognition between two individuals. The Fresh Fair Foundation announced the establishment of the Recognition Institute, a permanent organization dedicated to studying and implementing the principles of dignity-based development across all domains of human experience. This institute would serve as humanity's living connection to the wisdom discovered in that transformative moment at STOR W37. And so, friends, our story comes full circle. From a simple act of kindness between a homeless man and an undercover CEO to a fundamental reshaping of human civilization, we see how genuine recognition of human dignity can transform not just individuals or organizations, but the very fabric of reality itself. Let this story remind us that in every moment we have the opportunity to recognize and enhance the dignity inherent in all existence. As we move forward into humanity's next great adventure, may we carry with us the eternal truth discovered at STOR W37, that true transformation begins with simple recognition of the worth and dignity in every being. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of humanity's most profound moments of transformation. If this story has touched your heart, please share it with others who might benefit from its wisdom. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that illuminate the power of human dignity and recognition. Until next time, remember that every interaction carries the potential to transform not just individuals, but the very course of human development. The choice to recognize and honor human dignity in each moment remains our most powerful tool for positive change.